No one tells you what happens after the verdict. They show it in movies like it's clean, like the doors open, the jurors file out, the guilty are taken away, and the innocent, if they exist, are handed their lives back with a polite apology. That's a lie. The kind of lie that keeps the system breathing. The truth is quieter, heavier, and it starts when the bailiff leaves and the lock clicks behind you. At first, you think it's a mistake. 12 of you still sitting there, stiff-backed in wooden chairs, coats half on, verdict forms already signed. The air in the jury room smells like cold coffee and relief. You're ready to go home, ready to forget faces, words, photographs you were never supposed to carry for the rest of your life. Someone laughs nervously. Someone checks their phone. No signal. Then someone tries the door. It doesn't open. You don't panic yet. Panic comes later. Right now, you rationalize. Courthouses are old. Procedures are sloppy. Someone forgot something. Someone will come. But minutes pass. Then more. And then he speaks. The man sitting at the far end of the table, the one you all noticed but never really looked at, clears his throat. He's black, mid-40s, quiet the entire trial, not withdrawn, just observant, the kind of man whose stillness feels deliberate, like he's conserving energy for something important. His name, according to the placard in front of him, is Daniel Cross. You remember that because you remember thinking it didn't fit the way you expected it to. Daniel doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't stand. He doesn't demand attention. He just says calmly, "This isn't an accident." The room stills. A woman near the door scoffs, nervous. Someone jokes about lawsuits. Someone else says Daniel's being dramatic. Daniel waits. That's the first thing you should have noticed. People who are wrong rush to be heard. People who are right can afford to wait. You already made your decision. Daniel continues. All of you. Hours ago. That's why the door didn't open. Someone tells him to stop. Someone tells him he's not funny. Someone, maybe you, feels a flicker of irritation. You already did your civic duty. You already voted. You don't owe this man anything else. Daniel looks around the room slowly, deliberately, meeting each pair of eyes. When he looks at you, it feels like being seen in a way that isn't flattering. "I know you want this to be over," he says. "So do I. But it doesn't end until the truth finishes speaking." That's when you notice something else. No clock. You could have sworn there was one earlier. The trial was supposed to be simple. A black man on trial for the murder of a white city council aide. A late-night parking garage. One gunshot. No witnesses who stayed. Security footage that cut out at exactly the wrong moment. A public defender who looked tired before the first witness even took the stand. The defendant's name was Marcus Hale. You remember his face more than his words. Calm, almost resigned, not emotionless, just careful, like he knew any wrong expression would be used against him. The prosecution painted a familiar picture. A heated argument, a history of minor offenses, a gun registered to Marcus's cousin, found 2 blocks away. Motive built from implication instead of fact. The defense talked about doubt. You talked about probability. And when it came time to vote, you told yourself you were being reasonable. Daniel was the last holdout. You remember that clearly. Not loud, not defiant. He just kept asking questions that made people sigh. What puts him at the scene? Why wasn't that witness cross-examined? Why did the timeline change between statements? Someone accused Daniel of making it racial. Daniel didn't respond. Eventually, he voted guilty, unanimous, clean. And now here you are, locked in, with him. This isn't legal. Someone says now, louder than before. They can't just. They can, Daniel says. And they did. He reaches into his jacket slowly, too slowly. The movement tenses the room. Someone inhales sharply. Someone else stands. Daniel pulls out a folded piece of paper and places it on the table. Not a weapon, a transcript. He slides it toward the center. "This," he says, "is the part they didn't read out loud." No one moves. Daniel doesn't push. "You don't have to look," he says. "But if you don't, we'll be here longer." That does it. A man across from you grabs the paper and scans it quickly. His face tightens. He reads it again, slower this time. "What is this?" he asks. Daniel answers softly. "The original statement. taken the night of the murder, before it was edited. The room shifts. Chairs scrape. People lean in despite themselves. The statement describes a man running from the garage, but the description doesn't match Marcus. Wrong height, wrong jacket, wrong direction. Someone says it doesn't matter. Eyewitnesses are unreliable. Daniel nods. Correct, which is why it was changed. Silence thickens. You're saying evidence was altered? Someone asks. I'm saying it was corrected. Daniel replies. Corrected to fit a story you'd accept. You feel it now. That uncomfortable pressure behind your ribs. The one that shows up when something you believed starts loosening. Daniel folds his hands. Marcus Hale didn't kill anyone, he says. And the reason I know that is because the man who did is sitting in this room. The words don't land all at once. They ripple. Laughter breaks out. Sharp, disbelieving, defensive. That's insane. You're accusing one of us? This is some kind of stunt. Daniel lets it pass. Then he looks directly at the woman who testified about hearing the gunshot from the street. Tell them what you didn't say. He tells her. She freezes. The room turns. She shakes her head. I said everything. Daniel tilts his head slightly. You said you heard a single shot at 11:42 p.m. She nods. You didn't say, Daniel continues, that you heard arguing before that, or that the voice shouting wasn't Marcus's. Her lips part. No sound comes out. Daniel turns to another juror. You work parking enforcement, he says. You recognize the garage layout immediately. You also recognize the blind spot on camera 3. The man stiffens. So what? So you knew, Daniel replies, that anyone familiar with the building could step out of view for exactly 14 seconds. The room feels smaller now. Walls closer. And you, Daniel says, finally turning to you. You noticed the gun residue report was summarized, not shown. Your mouth is dry. You assumed, Daniel says, not unkindly, that the summary was accurate. You didn't assume. You chose. Daniel exhales slowly. This wasn't a trial, he says. It was a rehearsal, and you all played your parts. Someone bangs on the door. No response. Daniel stands for the first time. Not threatening, just present. The judge will ask later why the jury took so long to exit, he says. And for the first time in his career, he won't have an answer that protects him. A beat. Because the truth, Daniel says, finally asked to be heard. And you realize something then. This room wasn't locked to keep you in. It was locked to keep the lie from leaving untouched. No one speaks after that, not because there's nothing to say, but because everyone is suddenly aware that words have weight again, that this room is no longer a place where opinions float safely above consequences. The air has changed. It's thicker, pressurized, like the moment before a storm breaks something open. The woman Daniel addressed first, the one who testified about the gunshot, keeps rubbing her palms against her skirt, over and over, like she's trying to erase a sensation that won't go away. That's not true, she says finally, but her voice betrays her. It isn't defensive, it's pleading. I told them what I remembered. Daniel nods slowly. You told them what you were asked to remember. He walks to the table, resting his hands on the wood, not looming, not threatening, grounded. There's a difference, he says, between lying and being guided. Someone laughs again, louder this time. A man near the window. Nervous laughter, the kind that tries to shake off dread by mocking it. So what is this? The man says. Some kind of social experiment? You try and make a point? Daniel turns to him. His eyes are calm, but there's something sharp behind them now. I already made the point, Daniel says. You convicted an innocent man. Everything else is just explanation. That's when someone asks the question everyone's been avoiding. Who are you? Daniel considers that. He pulls out his wallet and places it on the table, opens it, slides an ID forward. Not law enforcement, not federal, not private security. A laminated card from a civilian oversight organization most people have never heard of. One of those entities buried 3 layers below anything recognizable, created to exist quietly and disappear easily. Daniel Cross, he says, same as the placard. That doesn't tell us anything. Someone snaps. Daniel closes the wallet. It tells you enough. He walks to the whiteboard where jurors scribble timelines during deliberation, dates, times, arrows connecting assumptions that felt logical when you made them. Daniel picks up a marker. You were told the murder happened at 11:42 p.m., he says, drawing a line, based on a gunshot report and a call placed 6 minutes later. He writes 11:42 on the board, but the security log from the garage elevator, he continues, records a maintenance override at 11:37. He writes 11:37. That log was never submitted into evidence. Do you know why? No one answers. Because it belonged to a private contractor, Daniel says, and private contractors don't testify unless someone makes them. He draws another arrow. The man killed that night didn't argue with Marcus Hale, Daniel says. He argued with someone he recognized. Your chest tightens. Daniel's voice lowers, not for drama, but gravity. Someone he trusted. A chair scrapes backward. The parking enforcement officer, the one Daniel mentioned earlier, stands up. This is bullshit, he says. You can't just. Daniel looks at him. Really looks. You worked nights for 7 years, Daniel says. Same district. Same garages. You knew the aide. You wrote him tickets he never paid. The man freezes. That doesn't mean anything, he says, but there's no heat left in it. It means you were there before, Daniel replies. It means you knew the blind spots. And it means when you heard the shot, you didn't call it in. The room erupts. Voices overlap. Accusations fly. People shout about rights, about slander, about lawyers. Daniel lets it happen. Then he raises his hand. Not high, just enough. And slowly, terrifyingly, the room quiets. I'm not here to accuse, Daniel says. I'm here to explain. He taps the board. The man who pulled the trigger panicked. He ran. He dropped a gun in a place someone else would find it. Someone convenient. Someone already suspicious. Marcus, someone whispers. Yes, Daniel says. Marcus Hale, a man who happened to be walking through the garage minutes later, carrying groceries, on his way home from a late shift. Your stomach turns. You convicted him because the story fit, Daniel says. Not because it was true. The woman near the door shakes her head. Then why vote guilty, she demands. Why didn't you stop it? Daniel looks at her for a long moment. Because I needed you to, he says. The words hang. You needed us to convict an innocent man, someone says, incredulous. Daniel nods once. Yes. Anger flashes. Real anger now. Someone steps toward him. Someone calls him sick. Daniel doesn't flinch. You don't expose the system by asking it politely, he says. You expose it by letting it do exactly what it's designed to do. The weight of that lands hard. You think this is justice, someone shouts. No, Daniel says. This is evidence. He gestures to the door. The judge will ask why you're still here. Why a jury took hours longer than expected to exit. Why the bailiff reported unrest. Daniel's eyes move from face to face. And when he asks, one of you is going to tell him the truth. A beat, or none of you will, Daniel adds. And Marcus Hale will spend the rest of his life in a cage, while the real story stays buried. The room fractures again. People argue about responsibility, about fear, about whether one life is worth destroying many careers. Someone says, this isn't our job. Daniel's reply is immediate. It already was. Time stretches. Minutes feel like hours. Then someone says quietly, what happens if we speak? Daniel doesn't sugarcoat it. Careers end. Reputations collapse. Some of you will be called naive. Others will be called worse. But the truth will exist where it didn't before. And Marcus, you ask, surprising yourself. Daniel turns to you. If the truth is heard, he says. Marcus walks. Silence again. This one different. This one heavy with choice. Finally, the door clicks. Everyone freezes. The handle turns. The door opens. The judge stands there. Older than you remember. Smaller somehow. His robe immaculate. His face arranged into practiced authority that falters the moment he sees the room. What is going on? The judge asks. No one answers at first. The judge's gaze moves to Daniel, lingers. There's recognition there. Brief. Unwelcome. You, the judge says. Daniel inclines his head. Your Honor. The judge steps inside, closes the door behind him. The lock clicks again, and for the first time since the trial began, the judge looks uncertain. You were dismissed, the judge says to the room. Daniel speaks before anyone else can. With respect, he says, we weren't finished. The judge's jaw tightens. This is highly irregular. Yes, Daniel says. So was the trial. That's when it happens. The moment you'll never forget. The judge looks at Daniel, then at the jurors, then back again, and he asks, very quietly, what do you know? Daniel doesn't answer. He looks at you, at all of you. This part, he says, isn't mine. The room holds its breath. Someone has to speak. Someone has to decide whether this ends as a sealed transcript or a living truth. You feel your pulse in your throat. The judge waits, and the silence stretches, just long enough to become unbearable. Silence has a temperature. It cools first, pulling the heat out of anger, out of bravado. Then it settles into something colder, something that makes people aware of their own breathing, their own heartbeat, the fragile fact of being seen. The judge stands there waiting, not impatiently, not angrily, waiting like a man who understands that whatever comes next cannot be unsaid. You feel it before you think it. The weight has shifted. This is no longer about procedure. It's about confession. Not legal confession, human confession. The kind that doesn't ask permission. A juror clears his throat, then stops. Another shakes her head, tears welling without invitation. No one planned to be brave today. No one woke up ready to dismantle the version of themselves they've lived with comfortably for years. Daniel Cross doesn't move. He has already done what he came to do. The judge finally speaks again, softer now. If there's something you believe I should hear, he says, say it. No gavel, no command, an invitation. And suddenly, you understand why Daniel voted guilty, why he let it happen. Because this room, this moment, could only exist after a verdict. You stand. The movement surprises even you. Your legs feel weak, like they might refuse, but they don't. Everyone turns. 12 faces, each reflecting a different shade of fear, relief, resentment. You look at the judge. I notice something, you say. Your voice sounds strange to your own ears, clearer than you expected, less forgiving. The judge nods, encouraging. The gunshot residue report. You continue. We weren't shown the full document, just a summary. A pause. The summary said the residue was consistent with recent discharge. You swallow, but consistent doesn't mean conclusive, and the actual numbers weren't there. The judge's expression tightens, just slightly. Why didn't you ask for the full report? He asks. You hesitate, because the answer is ugly. Because I didn't want to slow things down, you say. Because everyone else seemed ready. Because the story already made sense. The words land heavier than you expected. The judge looks at Daniel. Daniel says nothing. The woman who testified about the gunshot stands next. I heard arguing, she says, voice shaking now. Before the shot. I didn't say it because the prosecutor didn't ask, and because I wasn't sure. Her eyes flick to the judge, and because I didn't want to be wrong. One by one, the room opens. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. A man admits he recognized the defendant from the neighborhood and assumed guilt before the trial began. A woman admits she trusted the confidence of the prosecution more than the substance of their evidence. Another admits he voted guilty because he didn't want to be the only holdout again. Each confession is small. Together, they are devastating. The judge listens, really listens, and with each word, something in him changes. You can see it in the way his shoulders sag, in the way his eyes lose that polished distance. This is not a judge presiding over a courtroom. This is a man watching the architecture of his certainty collapse. Finally, when the room falls quiet again, the judge turns to Daniel. Why, he asks. Why orchestrate this? Daniel steps forward now, not triumphantly, not angrily, purposefully. Because this isn't the first time, Daniel says. And it won't be the last, unless someone breaks the pattern where it actually forms. The judge exhales slowly. You manipulated a jury. Yes, Daniel replies. The same way the system does every day, only with transparency at the end. That's not justice. The judge snaps. No, Daniel agrees. It's exposure. The judge rubs his face with both hands. You could destroy lives with this, he says. Daniel's voice hardens for the first time. You already did. The words cut clean. The judge looks up sharply. Daniel doesn't look away. My brother, Daniel says quietly, was convicted in this building 12 years ago. Different courtroom, different charge, same outcome. The room stills. He was innocent, Daniel continues, and everyone involved told themselves they were being reasonable. The judge's eyes widen. Daniel nods. Yes, he says. You presided over that case too. A collective intake of breath. The judge stares at Daniel as if seeing him clearly for the first time. I didn't, the judge starts. You didn't know. Daniel finishes. That's the point. You didn't need to. The judge sits down heavily in one of the juror chairs. What do you want? He asks. Daniel's answer is immediate. A mistrial, a full review, and Marcus Hale released pending investigation. The judge laughs once. Hollow, you think I can just... You can, Daniel says, and you will, because if you don't, everything that happened in this room will become public record. The judge looks around, at the jurors, at the faces now stripped of comfort, and you'll all testify, Daniel adds, under oath, about how this verdict was reached. Silence again, different now, resolved. The judge closes his eyes. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then he opens them. Call the bailiff, he says quietly. Hours later, though it feels like a lifetime, the courthouse hums with unfamiliar energy. Attorneys rush, phones ring, whispers move faster than facts. Marcus Hale sits alone in a holding room, staring at the floor, preparing himself for a future he doesn't believe will change. When the door opens and his attorney steps in, breathless, eyes wide, Marcus doesn't look up. Marcus, the attorney says, you're being released. Marcus laughs bitterly. Don't play with me. I'm not, the attorney says. The judge declared a mistrial, effective immediately. Marcus looks up slowly. Why, he asks. The attorney hesitates. Because the jury spoke again. Marcus doesn't understand. Not yet. Outside, Daniel watches from across the hallway as Marcus walks free. They don't speak. They don't need to. Marcus nods once. Daniel returns it. That's all. The judge resigns 2 weeks later. Official statement. Health reasons. Unofficial truth. He couldn't carry it anymore. Some jurors lose jobs. Others lose sleep. One loses friends who don't want to hear the story. None of them walk away unchanged. And Daniel Cross disappears. No interviews. No accolades. No book deals. Just absence. But the pattern cracks. Other verdicts are questioned. Other juries hesitate longer. Other judges listen harder. Not because the system has become good, but because it has become watched. And somewhere in that watching, something human survives. The jury never left. They just learned what it meant to stay. Years pass the way they always do after something breaks open. Not cleanly. Not evenly. The city doesn't change overnight. Courthouses still rise early and close late. Trials still follow scripts written long before the people inside them arrive. The language stays the same. Objection. Sustained. Beyond reasonable doubt. But something beneath it has shifted. Subtle. Almost invisible. Like a hairline fracture in glass. Marcus Hale never becomes a symbol. That's important. He doesn't give speeches. He doesn't stand on courthouse steps with microphones pointed at his face. He doesn't become a headline that people argue about online. He goes home. He cooks meals that taste wrong at first. He wakes up in the night expecting concrete walls. He learns slowly how to exist again in a world that nearly erased him. Freedom, it turns out, is not loud. It's disorienting. Marcus gets a job fixing HVAC systems. Honest work. Quiet work. He keeps his head down. But sometimes, when he's standing in an empty building, listening to the hum of machines behind walls, he thinks about that jury room. about how close he came to disappearing inside a word someone else chose for him. He never meets Daniel Cross again, but he knows who saved him, and that's enough. The jurors scatter into different lives, carrying the same memory in different weights. One becomes an advocate for jury reform, not out of idealism but penance. Another refuses jury duty for the rest of her life and can never fully explain why. One tells the story at dinner parties until people stop inviting him. Another never tells it at all. And you carry it quietly. You notice how often people say, "That's just how it is." You notice how easily certainty replaces curiosity. You notice how fast comfort becomes cruelty when it's protected by procedure. You learn to hesitate. That becomes your rebellion. The judge lives longer than he expected to. He leaves the bench and discovers how little the world needs him outside that robe. He walks more, reads less law, more history. He avoids mirrors at first, then stops avoiding them. What unsettles him most is not the mistake itself. It's how easy it was, how natural it felt to trust the shape of the process instead of the substance of truth. He starts attending trials as a spectator, sitting in the back, listening, watching juries deliberate like a man studying weather patterns he once believed he controlled. Once, years later, he is invited to speak at a private judicial conference. Closed doors, no press, a room full of people who sound like he once did. They ask him what he's learned. He opens his mouth, and nothing comes out, because every answer he considers feels dishonest. Finally, he says only this: "I learned that silence isn't neutral." The room waits for more. There's no more. That becomes his legacy. Daniel Cross is harder to trace. That was always the point. There are rumors. A man matching his description seen in other cities, other courtrooms, always near moments where certainty collapses and doubt becomes dangerous. Always present just long enough to ask the right question, then gone. Some say he works for an organization. Others say he doesn't work for anyone anymore. The truth is simpler. Daniel learned, too late, that justice rarely arrives through permission. It arrives through disruption, through forcing people to look at what they benefit from not seeing. He never stops being careful, but he does stop being quiet. The last time the judge sees Daniel is not dramatic. There's no confrontation, no courtroom, no audience. They pass each other outside a small cafe on an ordinary afternoon. Two older men now, less rigid, more tired. Their eyes meet. The judge recognizes him instantly. Daniel recognizes him too. The judge opens his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, maybe to ask a question he's been carrying for years. Daniel raises a hand, just slightly, not to threaten, not to command, to stop him. Daniel says one sentence, only one. "You believe the verdict because it let you sleep." The judge freezes. There's nothing to argue, nothing to justify, nothing to correct, because it's true. Daniel nods once and walks away. The judge stands there long after, surrounded by city noise, people moving past him, unaware that something inside him has finally gone quiet, speechless, not from guilt, from clarity. The story doesn't end with redemption. It ends with awareness, with the understanding that justice is not a destination, it's a posture, something you lean toward, even when it costs you comfort, even when it costs you certainty, even when it costs you silence. The jury never left, because once you see how the verdict is made, you can never unsee it, and that is the sentence everyone carries forward.